The second Soul Foundation Symposium on the subject of unidentified anomalous phenomenon was held recently on the waterfront at Fort Mason in San Francisco, and the event drew hundreds of attendees from all over the world, as well as a cadre of brilliant presenters on the forefront of this kind of research. The Soul Foundation so far is a kind of unicorn, a think tank of world-class credibility working to mainstream a topic of high strangeness and controversy, ultimately paving the path ahead for future research and exploration.
Well, the mission of Soul is to advocate for more research, transparency with the government, and deliberate policy development regarding UAP. And that's important because many reasons, really. I think there's so much we can learn by being more transparent and open about researching UAP, whether it be technology or just awareness of our place in the universe, and the socioeconomic implications, in addition to the national security implications that these phenomena implicate. And so I think Soul is working to address that in a very holistic manner. And I really admire their approach to not just bring in the hard sciences, but the humanities as well.
I think this event is a community builder. And I think the Soul Foundation inhabits a particular part of the spectrum of the UAP UFO phenomenon, and it does it really, really well. And I know it's not university-based, but it's filled with academics, and it's created by academics. And so it has a kind of integrity to it and a kind of sophistication that I think is really very attractive to someone like me.
Soul is working to foster serious scientific interest, capital investment, and collaboration in and around the UAP topic.
Soul is the first mover, and there are a lot of people that are quietly watching to either watch it fall on its face, right, or to see it succeed. There you have people on both sides of the spectrum, but it is definitely the alpha, the beta, the V1, the prototype of what a think tank of this degree and scale could look like specifically for the subject of UAP. And again, the Soul Symposium is the cornerstone, but there's a lot of work that happens around that, including their series of papers, which are arguably best in class and comparable to the best in the business in any other subject matter. And so it's not just bringing people together, but they're actually doing the work. And that has allowed more capital to come in, which will allow them to continue to do more work that's not sort of just laying the intellectual foundation, which is probably what we can say the first 2 years were, is to create the academic foundation by which you could then build future studies on top of. That foundation now exists.
A recent hearing in front of a House subcommittee marks the continued evolution of this subject in the public discourse. Once derided as the stuff of fantasy and confabulation, UAPs are now being taken very seriously by government, business, and academic interests.
Right. I think the hearing was a positive step forward in this whole area of UAP disclosure, and that's what we advocated for. We advocated for the government to come clean, basically, and also have a policy that was more again, deliberate and holistic and didn't hide things. And that's progress, I think.
And Soul is one of the few places where all those stakeholders can share space and cross-pollinate.
I think one of the biggest challenges we have right now is that academia is reticent to really engage in the issue, both from a study perspective and a funding perspective. And I think Soul provides an opportunity for those who are maybe more in the academic lane or come from the ivory tower to really come together and then galvanize the energy to continue to push the destigmatization of the issue.
I think Soul event has evolved beautifully from last year, where last year it was more about the presentation of the variety of research and kind of the scope of what is available. Also people actually in the field doing the research, and what kind of policies, given the current state of politics, as well as how can we raise awareness of the topic. And this year it's much more focused on conversation, asking questions, and the way the Soul is set up this time, because there are questions on the stage, so there's more like Leslie Keane is interviewing, and there is an engagement in discussions from the audience, and that continues into the corridors or into the halls. where we are able to wonder, like Avi Loeb was talking about, are we curious? It's about following our inquiry. And I think that's why this topic is so current, because everyone from their own awareness, technical or philosophical or spiritual component, they can enter the topic, and there is an interdisciplinary exchange.
Given the unprecedented nature of what's being encountered and the riddles it presents to our brightest minds in science, math, philosophy, and more, an opportunity for huge intellectual progress and growth is now collectively in humanity's hands, and will require a collective response.
One of the things that's most important about what the Soul Foundation is doing is it is bringing together some of the most brilliant academic and scientific minds from literally around the world. And what it demonstrates is that the scientific and academic community, they are waking up to the fact that there is really something going on that deserves serious study. And all of this needs to be, scientifically based. So having an organization like Soul that is looking at it from a scientific point of view, from an academic point of view, I think what it does is it gives permission for other academics, other scientists to look into this as well.
And in my understanding that the most innovations, or the way that we can progress, happens in the cross-discipline, where we can exchange the methodology, the perspective, gain awareness, step into somebody else's shoes, and offer our own perspective to others.
Serious scientists, serious researchers are taking a very, very serious look at this and looking at the data and realizing that there is something indeed going on. There is this plethora of data that they are looking at and saying to themselves, this is something we really need to investigate.
Like Apollo 13, when they threw everything on the table and they said, this is what we have, this is our resources. Everyone's idea is we are going for it, and then we're going to eliminate. So we are at this point, and the Soul allows for this to kind of throw everyone's concept without truncating it too early, and allow for that discussion to take place. So my hat is off with great respect to the organizers, and managing to allow for this to percolate. This discussion is wonderful.
Like it or not, money is a primary driver of what gets researched, and one of Soul's primary missions is to draw capital investment from entrepreneurs and venture capitalists who like the thrill of seeking out and commercializing the next big thing in science and technology.
The number one thing that they're doing right now that I think is valuable is they're opening the door for more people to come and have the conversation. That's the first step. After that, money is a key aspect. If we want to do science, science costs money. And right now, one of the biggest funders of science is still the government. And so we need to, again, continue to push private funding into UAP studies just because the government is not there yet. And that can help, again, to continue to move the ball down the field because we need the data.
In spite of clear radar and photographic evidence to the contrary, and decades of reports, both civilian and military, there are those in government and elsewhere who continue to deride the subject and insist it's all an overblown conspiracy theory.
There's been a big stigma attached with the topic, and that has prevented people from coming out, but it's gradually changing, and folks like me and institutions like Soul are working to do that, and they're having a pretty good effect. Just as I shared during my remarks at this symposium here, that 2 individuals came to me after my hearing, and one is still on active duty, and he was on the bridge of a ship that had a pretty well-known observation of a transmedium UAP, the USS Omaha, and then he was on another ship where he saw even more activity, and he's still in the Navy. But he felt that it's time now to blow away that stigma and begin reporting and being open and clear-eyed about what's happening and learning from it.
Yet the organization established by Congress to collect reports from members of the armed services and protect whistleblowers has itself been accused of dismissing credible testimony and reinforcing stigma. Some have even called it a honey trap meant to attract and plug leaks of classified material. John T. Kozlowski, the new director of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, is now on a mission to ameliorate Arrow's image. Whether whistleblowers and witnesses buy his story remains to be seen.
Arrow's lack of transparency has eroded trust in general and with that office specifically, and many witnesses I know of have not wanted to go and make reports to them, but they have come to me and others. And so right now, I think they should go to the office. They should make the reports. They have a congressional mandate to do it. The new director was on the Hill working to convince the members of the Armed Services Committee that he was meeting his congressional mandate. And so I think it's worth giving that office another chance. Now, I also would like individuals who have reports, especially in the military, to come to me. And it's a big reason why I've come out and spoken about this, because you have these witnesses, many are junior relative to my retired rank, and so they potentially have a lot to lose career-wise because of this stigma. And I think we're working to erode that stigma, and I encourage more military members to come out and report, at least to me, and then I can give them that top cover. And that's really the big reason why I have been outspoken about this, is to give those courageous witnesses and whistleblowers some top cover and validate their credibility.
The ongoing struggle for UAP transparency within the U.S. government is one that straddles the political fence, with both opponents and supporters rife on either side. It will take a sophisticated effort with many moving parts to achieve this kind of systemic change.
The thing that many people or much of the public may not be aware of is Congress is taking this very, very seriously. There is intense interest on Capitol Hill, as many members of Congress have come to realize that the Department of Defense and the intelligence community have been lying to them for literally decades. So in our conversations with lawmakers on Capitol Hill, they are really wanting, there is this thirst for information. They want the history, they want a better understanding of what we think is going on behind the scenes in terms of what the national security establishment is up to. So the thing to keep in mind for your viewers is that people on both sides of the aisle, this is one of the very few topics that Republicans and Democrats are in agreement on, that this is a serious national security issue, and that the Department of Defense and the executive branch essentially, they've not really been coming clean with the with the legislative branch.
Such a complicated issue requires a sound political game plan, and there's room for the public to absolutely get involved.
The key factor, in my view, is going to be the mandate coming from the executive that will then drive the focus from committees and leadership within Congress. If people want to engage on this subject and be able to move it forward, one of the number one things to do is we still have members of Congress that do not believe there is a political incentive to speak on this issue. So we need to continue to give them that political incentive, which is as simple as writing a letter, emailing, or calling them. I know this sounds archaic to a lot of folks, but this is the reality of the world that we live in. These people run for elections every 2 years, and they will speak to and talk about the issues that they believe their constituents care about. If they believe that their constituents care about the UAP issue, they will then speak to it more. So that is the number one thing that people can do. They can go to uapcaucus.com. We have tools for outreach there, and also just support any organizations that are pushing for the scientific study of the subject. So whether that's the Galileo Project, whether that's SOL, whether that's the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies, there are a ton of science programs that are out there that, again, can use the bolstering and support of the public, because ultimately, whether it's disclosure or discovery, we need to be doing both, and we need to support both ecosystems.
The recent re-election of former President Donald Trump to a second term represents yet another wild card in this ongoing struggle between the executive and legislative branches of government.
Well, it's not clear immediately. We have a new administration coming in. I'm partially encouraged because 3 of the individuals named have all spoken openly about UAP, which is remarkable in itself because they had very senior positions. John Ratcliffe, former Director of National Intelligence going into the CIA now as the director. We had Mike Waltz, who was a former congressman and now will be going into as National Security Advisor. He's done that, as well as Rubio, Senator Rubio, who's now going to come in as Secretary of State. He has too. He's been a big champion for disclosure and research and transparency. Those are good signs. And I think this is a pretty important takeaway. I was an appointee in the Trump administration. I can't say that I'm a big fan of the president to elect, but he put in some good people in the past administration, and I hope I was one of them, because our agency did advance. And I think we did good things. And at the same time, there were others in the White House. And so I think it's important to give the new administration a chance. And on this topic of UAP disclosure and research, they may be able to come through. So I'm not going to give up on that. And that's part of what SOL's purpose is regardless of the politics and what side of the aisle you're on, if we have to work with the current administration that's coming in, and that's what we'd like to do, is encourage them to openly address UAP and let the American people know what the nature of reality really is.
This is really a significant constitutional issue. The UAP topic has been classified, or is currently classified under within the executive branch and also under the Department of Energy. And because of that, the way that it has been classified, Congress currently does not have the legal mechanisms in place to view the information that is being hidden by the executive branch. So in our view, this is a significant legislative oversight authority when members of Congress are not being given the information about what the executive branch knows, and they're also not being given the information on the monies that are allocated by Congress for the Department of Defense or the DOE or other agencies. Congress isn't being told where that money is going. And we know that is something that needs to be corrected. There is essentially a political imbalance, a power struggle between the executive and the legislative. And what we are saying to members of Congress is that it is your constitutionally mandated authority to be read into this kind of stuff and to know what the executive branch knows, to know what the executive branch has been hiding, to know where these trillions of dollars in unaccounted Pentagon expenditures, what special access programs those monies are going to. Congress needs to know that. Congress cannot effectively legislate when they are being kept purposely in the dark by the Department of Defense, the executive branch, the Central Intelligence Agency.
However, the government responds to the ongoing disclosure from witnesses and the alarming presence of UAPs and drones over American bases both here and internationally, the subject promises to shake up how we conceive of our species, the planet, the wider universe, and our place in the unfolding ontological drama. It represents a challenge to the way we see the world and how we imagine the physical universe. Where does consciousness end and the world begin?
Well, there's an undeniable aspect of the phenomena that you can call paranormal or whatever, but it exists and it's interacting with our consciousness. And I think if you step back a bit, that's also not remarkable. So the fact that these phenomena could originate somewhere else in the universe or another dimension is certainly possible. We don't know all there is to know about physics, obviously, because the UAPs exhibit characteristics in terms of movement that we can't explain with the physics as we know them today. And the same goes for this aspect of the phenomena, because when you look at quantum mechanics and theory, a foundational element of the universe is mind or consciousness. That is solid in quantum theory and mechanics. And if you just take that as a fundamental truth, which scientists do, then you can't remove mind, the idea of mind, from reality. And it could originate. It's associated with the Big Bang somehow, all the way to now, 14 billion years later. So I think it's really just naive to think this is just a nuts and bolts phenomenon when we know the nature of reality is more than that.
My own sense is that whatever the phenomena is, it breaks those boundaries. There's clearly a physical, material aspect that can be studied by the sciences, but there's also clearly a paranormal or spiritual side to this that cannot be studied by the sciences, but that can be at least addressed by the humanities and the social sciences. I don't think any of us have the answer. I think the phenomenon shatters, frankly, our categories and our way of breaking up the world. But that itself to me is really attractive. That's what makes it a really profound intellectual question, is that shattering of categories and boundaries.
Such big questions require a thoughtful response, and soul seems to be at the absolute center of its development.
In science, we are meant to be not biased, and we are biased. In fact, this is my previous soul talk was talking about that there is just not possible. The science actually proved that we are biased. If we come looking for it, it will end up being manifested if we look often enough. And that's why statistical analysis keeps evolving on how we apply it. And that's why we have blind studies and so on. But there is this element that there is an inner drive, this inner curiosity. And as children, it's truncated in us, because we are told what to look, where to look, and the questions are answered for us. And and that's how we lose motivation. That's why we end up in depression. And that's why we have an anxiety. And that's why we don't know what we want to do. So it's time to let this natural curiosity, which we do have as children, to let it be flourished. And let that expansion happen through inquiry. Because once the most successful people that we want to be together, that have this wondrous mind, and they keep asking unusual questions, and they're pursuing it, and we want to be with them, because we can see the spark.
Humanity is in the midst of a transformation from a sometimes beautiful, often barbarous past and into an unknown future. Technology threatens, and technology may save us all, whether it comes from our own fierce intellects or through some alien bequeathing. Either way, it's past time to rethink the nature of things.
Well, that's what I think it's about at the end of the day. It is about this it's about one's sense of reality and what the phenomena implies about the real world.